The needle slid into Maya Chen's arm as she watched her own blood flow through clear tubing into the tiny body lying motionless on the gurney beside her. Twin A's monitor had flatlined twice in the past minute. Twin B wasn't far behind. "Maya, stop!" Dr. Harrison pleaded, his hand hovering over the transfusion controls. "You've given too much already. This could kill you." She turned her head, dizzy but determined, and looked at the two 6-month-old babies whose lives hung by the thinnest of threads. Her blood, AB negative, the same rare type flowing in their tiny veins, was the only thing standing between them and death. The hospital's blood bank was empty. The nearest supply was 2 hours away. They had maybe 10 minutes. "Take more," Maya whispered, her voice steady despite the weakness creeping through her limbs. "They need more." Hospital Administrator Wells stood in the corner, phone pressed to his ear, his face a mask of corporate panic. "Yes, I understand the liability implications," he hissed into the device, "but it's happening right now." Maya didn't care about liability. She didn't care about protocols. She didn't care that this single decision would destroy everything she'd worked 5 years to build. All she cared about were the two tiny hearts that had just started beating stronger as her life force flowed into them. She had no idea that in less than 24 hours, she'd be escorted from the hospital like a criminal. She had no idea that the parents of these babies were tech billionaires who'd been desperately searching for the mysterious nurse who'd saved their children's lives. And she definitely had no idea that those same billionaires had just purchased the entire hospital where she was about to lose everything. But that was still tomorrow. Right now, in this moment at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday that would change her life forever, Maya Chen was simply doing what she'd always done, saving lives, no matter the cost. 8 hours earlier, Maya had been living in what felt like a completely different world. St. Mary's Children's Hospital hummed with its familiar midnight symphony, the soft beeping of monitors, the whispered conversations of night staff, and the distant hum of fluorescent lights that never quite warmed the sterile corridors. The antiseptic scent lingered in every breath, a smell that had become as comforting to Maya as her morning coffee. She moved through the pediatric intensive care unit with the quiet confidence of someone who'd found her calling. At 28, Maya Chen had been a pediatric nurse for 5 years, and in that time, she'd developed what her colleagues lovingly called the touch. Premature babies stopped crying when she held them. Anxious parents relaxed when she explained procedures. Even the most difficult IV insertions seemed effortless in her capable hands. "Room 3114 needs you," called Janet, the veteran night nurse whose gray hair had witnessed 3 decades of hospital drama. 2-month-old with respiratory distress. Parents are first-timers and absolutely terrified. Maya nodded, checking her watch. 2:47 a.m. She'd been on shift since 6 p.m. and wouldn't clock out until 8 a.m. A 14-hour double shift that she'd picked up to help cover the monthly payment on her $47,000 nursing school debt. The student loan payment was due in 6 days, and her bank account was running dangerously low. She entered room 314 to find exactly what Janet had described, a tiny baby girl connected to a maze of wires and tubes with 2 exhausted parents hovering nearby. The mother, probably in her early 30s, had mascara streaking down her cheeks. The father kept running his hands through his hair, a nervous habit Maya had seen thousands of times. "Hi, I'm Maya, and I'm going to be taking care of little Emma tonight," she said softly, washing her hands at the sink. "I know this looks scary, but she's actually doing much better than when she first arrived." "Really?" the mother asked, hope flickering in her voice. The other nurse said her oxygen levels were low. Maya checked the monitors, noting the steady improvement in Emma's vitals. "See this number here?" She pointed to the pulse oximeter reading. 2 hours ago it was 89, now it's down by 4. We want it above 95, but she's climbing steadily. That's exactly what we like to see. She spent the next 20 minutes explaining each machine, each wire, each reading. She showed them how to recognize the good signs versus the concerning ones. She taught them how to hold Emma's tiny hand without disturbing the IV line. By the time she left the room, both parents were smiling for the first time in 12 hours. This was why Maya had become a nurse. Not for the money, God knew there wasn't much of that. Not for the prestige. People often assumed she'd failed to become a doctor. She'd become a nurse because every day she got to be the bridge between medical complexity and human fear. She got to turn terror into understanding, despair into hope. Walking back to the nurse's station, Maya caught her reflection in one of the darkened windows. Her black hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her scrubs, decorated with cheerful cartoon animals, were wrinkled from the long shift. She looked tired, which she was. She looked overworked, which she definitely was. But she also looked exactly like what she'd always dreamed of becoming. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother back home in Oregon. "Sweetheart, my medical bills came in today. Insurance covered most of it, but there's still $800 I need to pay. I know you're struggling too, but..." Maya closed her eyes and leaned against the wall. Her mother's diabetes had been getting worse, requiring more frequent doctor visits and expensive medications. Maya sent what she could each month, but between her own rent, student loans, and basic living expenses in the city, there wasn't much left over. She lived in a studio apartment so small that her bed doubled as her couch. She'd mastered the art of making ramen noodles taste like actual meals. She hadn't bought new clothes in 8 months. Her social life consisted of text messages with friends she couldn't afford to meet for drinks. But every morning when she put on her scrubs, every time she saw a baby take their first healthy breath, every moment when she could ease a parent's fear, it all felt worth it. This was her purpose. This was who she was meant to be. "Maya," Janet's voice cut through her thoughts. "We've got incoming trauma. Multiple injuries, 2 pediatric patients. ETA 4 minutes." Maya straightened up, pushing thoughts of bills and debt to the back of her mind. She had work to do. As she helped prepare the trauma bay, checking equipment and ensuring everything was ready, Maya had no idea that the next few hours would test every principle she'd ever held about medicine, morality, and the cost of doing what's right. The ambulance sirens were getting closer. "Maya, I need you in Trauma 1, called Dr. Harrison, the attending physician who'd become both a mentor and a friend over the past 2 years. "Janet, you take Trauma 2. This is going to be intense." Maya washed her hands one more time, checked that her stethoscope was secure around her neck, and took a deep breath. She'd handled hundreds of trauma cases. She was ready for whatever came through those doors. She wasn't ready for what was about to walk through her life and change everything. The automatic doors burst open with a crash that echoed through the emergency bay. The first thing Maya noticed wasn't the medical equipment or the frantic paramedics. It was the silence. In her 5 years of nursing, she'd never heard an ambulance arrive in complete quiet. No crying, no screaming, no sounds of life fighting to continue. "What do we have?" Dr. Harrison called out as the first gurney rolled through the doors. "Twin A, 6 months old, severe blood loss of unknown origin," the paramedic reported, her voice tight with professional concern. "Found unconscious approximately 45 minutes ago. Parents report the babies were healthy when put to bed. BP is 60/40 and dropping. Heart rate 180 and climbing." The second gurney followed immediately behind. "Twin B, same age, same condition. We've administered fluids but can't stabilize them. They need blood, and they need it now." Maya's trained eyes took in the scene as they transferred the babies to the hospital gurneys. 2 identical boys, their olive skin pale and waxy, their tiny chests rising and falling with mechanical precision from the ventilators. They couldn't have weighed more than 15 pounds each. Their little hands were so small that Maya's pinky finger would have dwarfed their entire fist. Behind the medical chaos, she caught a glimpse of the parents. The woman wore a designer coat that probably cost more than Maya's monthly salary, but it was wrinkled and stained with what looked like blood. Her hair was perfectly styled, but her face was raw with tears. The man beside her wore an expensive suit and a Rolex that caught the fluorescent lights, but his hands shook as he tried to answer the admission clerk's questions. "We don't understand," the woman kept repeating. "They were fine. They were perfectly fine when we put them to bed." "Ma'am, I need you to focus," Dr. Harrison said gently but firmly. "Any recent illnesses? Any new foods? Anyone new in the household?" "Just the new nanny," the father said. "We hired her 2 weeks ago. Sarah checked her references." "Where is she now?" Dr. Harrison interrupted. The parents exchanged a look that Maya couldn't quite read. She She left. Said there was a family emergency. Left about an hour before we found the boys like this. Maya filed that information away as she began hooking up monitors to Twin A. His vitals appeared on the screen, and her heart sank. Blood pressure, 55/35. Heart rate, 195. Oxygen saturation, 91% and falling, despite the ventilator. Dr. Harrison, we need to type and cross-match for blood transfusion, Maya called out. Now. Already on it, he replied, drawing blood samples from both babies. Get me 4 units each, type and cross-match, and call the blood bank. Tell them it's an emergency. The next 20 minutes blurred together in a symphony of controlled medical chaos. Maya started new IV lines, attached monitors, drew blood for lab work, and tried to stabilize 2 little boys who were quite literally bleeding to death from the inside. The blood type results came back first. AB negative. Maya felt her stomach drop. AB negative was the rarest blood type, found in less than 1% of the population. Dr. Harrison's phone rang. Maya could hear the blood bank coordinator's voice from across the room. Doctor, I'm sorry, we're completely out of AB negative. Used our last units yesterday for a surgery. I can call Portland General, but they're 2 hours away. 2 hours? Dr. Harrison's voice rose slightly. These babies don't have 2 hours. They don't have 20 minutes. Maya looked at the monitors. Twin A's blood pressure had dropped to 50/30. Twin B wasn't far behind. She'd seen enough pediatric trauma to know what those numbers meant. Without blood, without it soon, these babies would die. That's when she remembered her nursing school blood drive, the day she'd learned her own blood type. AB negative, universal plasma donor, the same type that could save these babies' lives. The thought hit her like a physical blow. She could save them, right now, right here. Her blood flowing into their tiny bodies could bring them back from the edge of death. But she also knew the rules. Hospital Policy 4.7.3. Healthcare workers are strictly prohibited from donating blood to patients under any circumstances. Liability issues, infection control, professional boundaries. She could lose her license, she could lose everything. Maya looked at Twin A's monitor. His blood pressure was 45/28. She could actually see the life draining out of his tiny face. Dr. Harrison, she said quietly, I'm AB negative. The room fell silent except for the increasingly urgent beeping of the monitors. Maya, no, Dr. Harrison said immediately. You know the rules. We can't. They're dying, Maya interrupted, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Right now, they're dying, and I can save them. The liability, someone started. I don't care about liability, Maya said, moving toward the supply cabinet. I care about these babies. She pulled out the blood donation kit, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. She'd done this procedure hundreds of times, just never on herself for a patient. Maya, stop, Dr. Harrison pleaded. If administration finds out, then don't tell them, Maya said, already swabbing her arm with alcohol. This is between us and these babies. The room erupted in argument. Someone mentioned insurance. Someone else brought up lawsuits. The parents started offering money, thousands, tens of thousands, whatever it would take. Maya blocked it all out. She looked at Twin A, his tiny chest barely rising and falling. She looked at Twin B, whose heart rate was now over 200, a desperate attempt by his little body to pump what blood remained through his system. She inserted the needle into her own arm. Take as much as they need, she said quietly. Because in that moment, Maya Chen wasn't thinking about hospital policies or professional consequences or personal liability. She was thinking about 2 little boys whose lives hung in the balance, and the simple fact that she had the power to save them. The blood began to flow from her arm into the collection bag, dark red and warm with life. In minutes, it would flow into the babies. In minutes, it might save them. And in less than 24 hours, it would cost Maya everything she'd worked for. But right now, watching the color slowly return to Twin A's face as her blood entered his tiny body, she knew she'd made the only choice she could live with, even if it meant she might lose everything else. The blood flowed from Maya's arm in a steady, life-giving stream. She lay on the gurney they'd quickly wheeled beside the babies, her arm extended as the technician managed the direct transfusion setup. Twin A was receiving blood through one line while a second bag filled for Twin B. "Maya, this is insane," Dr. Harrison muttered, but his hands never stopped working. He monitored the baby's vitals as Maya's blood entered their systems. "You're giving too much. A normal donation is 450 milliliters. You've already given 600. "How much do they need?" Maya asked, her voice steady despite the dizziness beginning to creep in around the edges of her vision. "Each baby needs at least 200 milliliters to stabilize," the lab technician answered reluctantly. "But Maya, that's 400 total, plus what you've already given." "Then take 400 more," Maya said without hesitation. "Take whatever they need." The argument around her intensified. Hospital Administrator Wells had appeared from nowhere, his phone pressed to his ear as he spoke in hushed, urgent tones about liability exposure and protocol violations. Head nurse Patricia stood beside him, her face a mask of professional disapproval. "Nurse Chen, you need to stop this immediately," Patricia commanded. "You're violating Hospital Policy 4.7.3, Section C. This is grounds for immediate termination." Maya turned her head to look at Patricia, noting how the movement made the room spin slightly. "Are you going to report me before or after these babies live?" "This isn't a joke, Maya," Patricia snapped. "You could transmit diseases. You could compromise your own health. You could, "I could save their lives," Maya interrupted, "which is exactly what I'm doing." On the monitors, Twin A's blood pressure had climbed to 70/45, still low but moving in the right direction. His heart rate was beginning to stabilize. Twin B, now receiving his transfusion, was showing similar improvements. The parents stood in the corner, the woman sobbing with relief as her husband held her. They'd tried to approach Maya several times to thank her, but the medical team had kept them back to maintain sterile conditions around the transfusion. "Miss, please," the father called out. "Let us pay you. Let us do something. Our children." "Just love them," Maya said softly, her words slightly slurred from blood loss. "Just love them every day." Dr. Harrison checked Maya's blood pressure. "Maya, you're at 95/60. That's getting dangerous for you. We need to stop." "How are the babies?" she asked. "Stabilizing. Twin A is at 75/50 now. Twin B is at 70/48. It's working, Maya. It's actually working." "Then don't stop." "Maya, don't stop," she repeated more firmly. "Not until they're safe." The technician exchanged the bag, starting the second direct transfusion. Maya's blood, rich with oxygen and life, flowed into Twin B's tiny body. She watched his color improve almost immediately, the waxy pallor giving way to healthy pink skin. Maya had given blood before, routine donations at hospital drives. But this was different. This wasn't just donation. This was direct, immediate, life-saving transfusion. She could see the results in real time. Her blood was literally bringing these babies back from death. The dizziness was getting worse. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright, and sounds were becoming muffled and distant. But the monitors showed two little hearts beating stronger with each passing minute. "That's enough," Dr. Harrison said finally. "Maya, that's enough. You've given over 800 milliliters. Any more, and you'll need a transfusion yourself." The technician began to disconnect the lines. Maya tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as the room spun violently around her. "Easy," Dr. Harrison said, helping her lie back down. "You're going to be weak for a while, what you just did. Maya, you literally saved their lives." "Are they going to be okay?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Their vitals are stabilizing. Blood pressure is rising. Heart rates are normalizing. Maya, without you..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Without you, we would have lost them both." Maya closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her like a tide. She'd never felt so drained, so completely empty. But she'd also never felt so certain that she'd done the right thing. "Get her orange juice and crackers," Dr. Harrison instructed a nurse. "And watch her closely. I want her vitals monitored every 15 minutes. As they wheeled Maya to a recovery room, she caught a glimpse of the twins being transferred to the NICU. Twin A's eyes were open, the first time she'd seen them conscious. Twin B was moving his tiny arms, fighting against the restraints with the kind of energy that meant life, real life, was flowing through his veins again. Their parents followed the gurneys, the woman turning back to mouth, "Thank you," to Maya before disappearing through the NICU doors. Maya lay in the recovery room, sipping orange juice and trying to keep her eyes open. She felt like she'd run a marathon, like every ounce of energy had been drained from her body. But beneath the exhaustion was something else, a deep, bone-deep satisfaction. She'd saved 2 lives tonight. Whatever consequences came from that, she could handle them. She had no idea that the consequences had already begun. Outside her room, she could hear Administrator Wells on his phone. "Yes, sir, I understand the gravity of the situation. Yes, sir, we'll have this handled by morning. No, sir, there won't be any repeat incidents." Dr. Harrison appeared in her doorway, his face troubled. "Maya, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Of course." "Do you regret it? Any of it?" Maya thought about the question, about her career, about the rules she'd broken, about the uncertain future that lay ahead. Then she thought about 2 little boys who were breathing because of her decision. "No," she said without hesitation. "I'd do it again. I'd do it right now if they needed me to." Dr. Harrison nodded slowly. "That's what I was afraid you'd say." "Afraid?" "Maya, you need to know. Wells is calling an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. Patricia's already drafting the incident report. They're going to make an example of you." The orange juice suddenly tasted like dust in her mouth. "What do you mean?" "I mean they're going to fire you, and they're going to make sure everyone knows why, so no other nurse ever tries what you did tonight." Maya closed her eyes. Deep down, she'd known this was coming. You don't break hospital policy this dramatically and walk away without consequences. But hearing it out loud still felt like a physical blow. "The babies," she said quietly. "Are they going to be okay?" "Yes. Thanks to you, they're going to be fine." "Then whatever happens to me happens," Maya said. "I can find another job. Those babies can't find another life." Dr. Harrison squeezed her shoulder gently. "Get some rest, Maya. Tomorrow's going to be rough." As he left, Maya stared at the ceiling and tried to process what was coming. In a few hours, she'd lose her job. Probably her career, definitely her financial stability. The student loans would still be due. Her mother's medical bills would still need to be paid. Her tiny apartment rent would still come due in 2 weeks. But somewhere in this hospital, 2 little boys were sleeping peacefully in their NICU beds, their hearts beating strong and steady with her blood flowing through their veins. 2 parents who'd thought they were going to lose everything were instead planning futures with their children. Maya fell asleep with that thought, unaware that those same parents were already working to find out her name, her story, and how they could possibly repay the woman who'd given everything to save their sons. And completely unaware that by tomorrow afternoon, they would own the hospital that was about to destroy her life. Maya woke up in the recovery room 6 hours later, her head pounding and her arm throbbing where the needle had been. The morning sun was streaming through the hospital windows, casting long shadows across the floor. For a moment, she felt disoriented, unsure why she was lying in a hospital bed instead of caring for patients. Then the memories came flooding back. The twins, the transfusion, the blood flowing from her arm into their tiny bodies. She sat up slowly, testing her balance. The dizziness had mostly subsided, though she still felt weak and hollow. A nurse she didn't recognize was checking her IV bag. "How are you feeling?" the woman asked with professional kindness. "Like I got hit by a truck," Maya admitted. "But I'll live. How are the babies, the twins from last night?" The nurse's expression shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. "They're stable. That's all I can tell you." Something in her tone sent a chill down Maya's spine. "What do you mean, that's all you can tell me?" "I mean, I have instructions not to discuss patient information with you." The nurse avoided eye contact. "There's been some complications regarding your involvement in their care." Before Maya could ask what that meant, the door opened and head nurse Patricia walked in, followed by a security guard. Patricia's face was stone cold, her usual professional demeanor replaced by something harder and more clinical. "Maya, you need to get dressed," Patricia said without preamble. Mr. Wells wants to see you in his office immediately. Can I at least check on— No, Patricia cut her off. You cannot check on any patients. You cannot access any patient files. You cannot discuss any patient care. You are hereby suspended from all nursing duties pending an administrative review. The security guard stepped forward slightly. Ma'am, I'll need to escort you to the administrator's office. Maya's heart began to race. She'd expected consequences, but the formality of this, the security guard, the suspension, the official language, was more severe than she'd imagined. Patricia, I saved those babies' lives, Maya said quietly. You violated hospital protocol, Patricia replied, her voice devoid of emotion. Multiple protocols, deliberately and knowingly. Now get dressed. Mr. Wells is waiting. The walk to the administration wing felt like a funeral march. The security guard walked beside her, not close enough to be obviously threatening, but close enough to make his purpose clear. Colleagues she'd worked with for years averted their eyes as they passed. Word had obviously spread. Maya had been in Mr. Wells' office only twice before. Once when she was hired, and once when she'd received a commendation for her work with a particularly difficult case. The office was designed to intimidate. Dark wood paneling, diplomas, and certificates covering one wall, and a massive desk that made visitors feel small and insignificant. Wells was waiting for her, along with Patricia and a woman Maya didn't recognize, probably from legal. They sat on one side of the desk while a single chair faced them on the other side. "Sit down, Miss Chen," Wells said, his voice formal and cold. Maya sat, folding her hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. "Let's be very clear about what happened last night," Wells began, opening a thick folder. "You deliberately violated Hospital Policy 4.7.3 regarding healthcare worker blood donation. You ignored direct orders from your supervisor. You performed an unauthorized medical procedure. You exposed this hospital to massive liability. And you did all of this without regard for proper medical protocols or patient safety standards." "I saved 2 babies' lives," Maya said quietly. "You put 2 babies at risk," the legal woman interjected. "You could have transmitted blood-borne pathogens. You could have had an adverse reaction that would have compromised your ability to provide care. You could have—" "But I didn't," Maya interrupted. "The babies are alive because of what I did." "The babies are alive because of proper medical intervention by qualified physicians," Wells corrected. "What you did was reckless, dangerous, and completely unacceptable." Maya felt anger beginning to build beneath the exhaustion. "So you would have rather let them die? You would have rather followed protocol and watched 2 6-month-old babies bleed to death?" "We would have rather followed proper procedures and contacted other hospitals, arranged for emergency transport, or found other medical alternatives," Patricia said. "There are protocols for a reason, Maya. They exist to protect patients and protect staff. Those protocols would have taken hours. The babies had minutes." "That's not for you to decide," Wells said sharply. "You're a nurse, not a doctor. You don't make those kinds of judgment calls." The words hit Maya like a slap. In 5 years of nursing, she'd never been spoken to like this. As if her experience, her education, her years of saving lives meant nothing. "Mr. Wells, those babies would have died," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I know you have policies, but I also know medicine. Without immediate blood transfusion, they would have gone into hypovolemic shock and died. I had the right blood type. I was there. I could save them. And in doing so, you violated every principle of professional nursing practice," the legal woman said. "You exposed this hospital to lawsuits. You compromised your own health. You ignored the chain of command. I saved 2 lives, Maya said again, louder this time. The room fell silent. Wells stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Miss Chen, your employment with St. Mary's Children's Hospital is terminated, effective immediately," he said finally. "Security will escort you to your locker to collect your personal belongings. You are banned from hospital property except for official business. We will be recommending to the State Nursing Board that your license be reviewed for possible suspension or revocation." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She'd known this was coming, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that preparations couldn't match. "The babies," she started, "are no longer your concern," Wells finished. You have 30 minutes to clear out your locker. Security will ensure you leave the premises without incident. Maya stood up slowly, her legs unsteady. Can I at least say goodbye to... No, Patricia said firmly. You cannot contact patients, families, or staff regarding any medical matters. You cannot discuss the events of last night with anyone. Any violation of these restrictions will result in additional legal action. The security guard stepped forward. Ma'am, if you'll come with me. The walk to the staff locker room was the longest of Maya's life. Colleagues who had been friends just yesterday now avoided eye contact. Some looked sympathetic, but afraid to show it. Others looked judgmental, as if she'd committed some heinous crime. Her locker contained 5 years of accumulated life. Extra scrubs, comfortable shoes, personal photos, thank you cards from families, small gifts from grateful patients. She packed it all into a cardboard box with shaking hands. Janet, the veteran night nurse, appeared beside her locker. Maya, she whispered, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. What you did last night? That was the most nurse thing I've ever seen anyone do. Don't let them make you forget that. I might lose my license, Janet. Honey, you can take away someone's license, but you can't take away who they are. You're a nurse. In here, she pressed her hand to her chest, where it counts. No administrator can change that. The security guard cleared his throat. Ma'am, time to go. Maya hugged Janet quickly, grabbed her box, and followed the guard toward the exit. As they passed the NICU, she tried to catch a glimpse through the windows, hoping to see the twins she'd saved. But the blinds were closed. Outside, Maya sat in her car in the parking lot, cardboard box in her lap, and finally let herself cry. 5 years of work. Gone. Her career possibly destroyed. Her financial stability definitely ruined. Her reputation in the medical community likely poisoned. But somewhere in the building behind her, 2 little boys were breathing because of her decision. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. How's work going, sweetheart? I saw on the news that there was some kind of incident at your hospital last night. Maya stared at the message, unsure how to respond. How do you tell your mother that you've just lost everything because you chose to save 2 lives instead of following rules? She started typing, I did something that needed to be done. There might be consequences. Then she deleted it and wrote instead, Everything's fine, Mom, just another day at the hospital. As she drove away from St. Mary's for what might be the last time, Maya had no idea that the incident was already making national news. She had no idea that the twins' parents were desperate to find and thank the mysterious nurse who'd saved their children. And she had no idea that those same parents had enough money to buy the entire hospital, which is exactly what they were about to do. But that revelation was still hours away. Right now, Maya drove home to her tiny apartment to figure out how to rebuild a life that had just crumbled around her. All because she'd chosen to save 2 babies instead of following protocol. 6 weeks later, Maya stood behind the counter of Murphy's Diner, a 24-hour restaurant that served truckers, night shift workers, and anyone else who needed cheap food at odd hours. The smell of grease and coffee had replaced the familiar antiseptic scent of the hospital. Her hands, once steady with IVs and delicate medical equipment, now shook slightly as she poured coffee into chipped ceramic mugs. Order up, called Eddie, the cook, sliding 2 plates of eggs and bacon across the pass-through window. Maya delivered the plates to table 6, 2 construction workers starting their early shift, and tried to summon a smile as they thanked her. Everything felt mechanical now, like she was operating her life from a distance. The job at Murphy's paid $8.50 an hour, plus tips. On a good night, she might take home $90. On a bad night, maybe $60. It was barely enough to cover rent on her studio apartment, and nowhere near enough to pay her student loans, which had gone into forbearance but were accumulating interest daily. Her mother's medical bills had gone unpaid for 3 weeks now. The collection calls had started. Maya wiped down tables and refilled coffee cups, trying not to think about the letter from the state nursing board that had arrived yesterday. Investigation ongoing, it said. License suspended pending review. Even if she was eventually cleared, the process could take months, and in the meantime, no hospital would hire a nurse under investigation. Hey, aren't you that nurse from the news? Asked a customer at the counter, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. Maya's stomach clenched. The story had gotten picked up by local news stations 6 weeks ago, then by national outlets. Nurse fired for saving babies had been the most common headline. The coverage had been mostly sympathetic, but it had also made her recognizable in ways that weren't always comfortable. I might be, Maya said carefully. Well, I think what you did was heroic, the woman said firmly. Don't let anyone tell you different. Those babies are alive because of you. Thank you, Maya whispered, fighting back tears. Can I get you more coffee? Not all the recognition was positive. Last week, a man had lectured her about following the rules and why hospitals have policies. Another customer had suggested she was just doing it for attention. The comments hurt more than she'd expected. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from her landlord. Rent is 5 days late. Need payment by Friday, or I'll have to start eviction proceedings. She closed her eyes and leaned against the coffee machine. Rent was $2,200 a month. After 6 weeks at the diner, she'd managed to save $800. She was $400 short with no idea where to find it. The bells above the diner door chimed, and Maya looked up to see Dr. Harrison walking in. She hadn't seen him since the day she was fired, though he'd tried calling several times. She'd been too embarrassed to answer. Maya, he said, approaching the counter with obvious concern. I've been trying to reach you. I've been busy, she said, pouring him coffee without being asked. Black, 2 sugars. She remembered how he liked it from countless night shifts together. How are you holding up? He asked gently. Maya gestured around the diner. Living the dream, obviously. Dr. Harrison winced. Maya, what happened to you wasn't right. Half the nursing staff at St. Mary's thinks you're a hero. We've been trying to get Wells to reconsider. It's over, Michael, Maya said, using his first name for the first time. At the hospital, it had always been Dr. Harrison, but they weren't at the hospital anymore, and she wasn't a nurse anymore. I broke the rules. I knew the consequences. I don't regret saving those babies, but I can't pretend I didn't know what would happen. The babies are doing incredibly well, Dr. Harrison said softly. Perfect health. No complications. Their parents have been asking about you. Maya's hand stilled on the coffee pot. What do you mean? They've been calling the hospital, trying to get your contact information. Wells won't give it to them, of course, privacy policies. But they've been persistent. They want to thank you properly. I don't need thanks, I just needed them to live. Dr. Harrison studied her face. Maya, you look exhausted. Are you sleeping? Eating? She was sleeping, but not well. The tiny studio apartment had thin walls, and she could hear every footstep from the apartment above, every conversation from the street below. She was eating, but mostly ramen noodles and whatever food the diner let her take home at the end of her shift. I'm fine, she lied. No, you're not. Dr. Harrison leaned forward. Maya, listen to me. There are other hospitals. This will blow over. Your reputation in the medical community... My reputation in the medical community is that I'm a nurse who can't follow basic protocol, Maya interrupted. Who do you think is going to hire someone under investigation by the nursing board? Someone who values actual nursing over bureaucratic nonsense, Dr. Harrison said firmly. Maya, what you did that night, that was nursing at its purest. That was what this profession is supposed to be about. Maya felt tears threatening again. Michael, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I need to face reality. I might not be a nurse anymore. I might never be a nurse again, and right now I need to focus on keeping a roof over my head. The bells chimed again, and 3 teenagers walked in, laughing loudly and clearly intoxicated. Maya sighed and grabbed menus. I have to get back to work, she told Dr. Harrison. He left a $20 bill on the counter for his $2 coffee and squeezed her hand briefly. Maya, those babies are alive because of you. Don't let anyone make you forget that. After he left, Maya went through the motions of her shift, taking orders, serving food, cleaning tables. But his words echoed in her mind. The babies were alive. Whatever else had happened, whatever consequences she faced, 2 little boys were breathing and growing and living because of her decision. At 3 a.m., during a lull in customers, Maya stepped outside for fresh air. The parking lot was mostly empty except for a few long-haul trucks and her own beat-up Honda Civic. She leaned against the brick wall and looked up at the stars. barely visible through the city's light pollution. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Investigation continues into hospital blood donation incident. She almost deleted it without reading, but something made her click through. The article was mostly a rehash of previous coverage, but there was one new detail that made her heart skip. The twin boys, now 7 months old, have made a complete recovery according to hospital sources. However, the identity of their parents remains confidential, and the family has not made any public statements regarding the incident. Maya closed her eyes. 7 months old. They'd grown an entire month since she'd seen them. They were probably sitting up now, maybe starting to eat solid foods. Their parents were probably sleep-deprived from teething and night wakings and all the normal, wonderful challenges of raising babies. All because she'd chosen to break the rules. Her phone rang, startling her. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Maya Chen? The voice was crisp, professional, unfamiliar. Who's asking? My name is David Kim. I'm a private investigator. I've been hired to locate you regarding the incident at St. Mary's Children's Hospital 6 weeks ago. Maya's blood ran cold. I'm not interested in talking to reporters. I'm not a reporter, Miss Chen. I represent the parents of the twin boys you helped save. They've been trying to reach you through official channels, but the hospital won't provide your contact information. Maya's heart started racing. What do they want? They want to meet you. They want to thank you properly. And they want to discuss how they might help you with the situation you're currently facing. What situation? Miss Chen, my clients are aware that you lost your job because of what you did for their children. They're aware that you're facing financial hardship and potential loss of your nursing license. They would very much like to speak with you about how they might address these issues. Maya's mind was spinning. Who are your clients? I'm not at liberty to say over the phone, but I can tell you that they have significant resources and a strong desire to ensure that the woman who saved their children's lives doesn't suffer for her heroism. I don't want charity, Maya said quickly. This wouldn't be charity, Miss Chen. This would be gratitude. There's a difference. Maya was quiet for a long moment, processing this unexpected development. After 6 weeks of silence, of feeling forgotten and abandoned, the idea that the baby's parents had been looking for her was almost overwhelming. Miss Chen, are you still there? Yes, I'm here. I need time to think about this. Of course, but Miss Chen, there's something else you should know. My clients have been investigating the circumstances around their children's condition that night. They've discovered some concerning information about what really happened. What do you mean? I think that's something they should discuss with you in person. Would tomorrow evening work? They could meet you wherever you're comfortable. Maya looked back at the diner, at the life she'd been forced to build from the wreckage of her career. Then she thought about 2 little boys she'd never seen conscious, never seen healthy. Tomorrow evening, she agreed, but somewhere public. Murphy's Diner on Highway 60. I get off work at 8 p.m. Perfect, Miss Chen? Yes? My clients want you to know what you did that night changed everything, not just for their children, but for them as well. They'll explain tomorrow. After hanging up, Maya stood in the parking lot for several more minutes, trying to process what had just happened. The parents of the twins wanted to meet her. They knew she'd lost her job. They wanted to help. But more intriguingly, they'd discovered something about what had really happened that night. Something concerning. Maya went back inside and finished her shift, but her mind was racing. For 6 weeks, she'd felt like the story was over, that she'd made her choice, paid the price, and now had to live with the consequences. But maybe the story wasn't over after all. Maybe it was just beginning. Maya spent the next day in a state of nervous anticipation that made it impossible to concentrate on anything. She dropped plates at the diner, mixed up orders, and spilled coffee on herself twice. Eddie, the cook, finally sent her home early. Girl, you're a mess today, he said with gruff kindness. Go home, get your head straight, come back tomorrow. At 7:45 p.m., Maya sat in a corner booth at Murphy's Diner, wearing her cleanest jeans and the one nice blouse she owned that didn't have stains on it. She'd showered and put on makeup for the first time in weeks, though her hands had shaken so badly she'd had to redo her eyeliner 3 times. She had no idea what to expect. The private investigator's call had raised more questions than it answered. What had the parents discovered about that night? How did they even know her name? And what kind of people hired private investigators to track down a nurse? At exactly 8 p.m., the diner's bells chimed, and Maya looked up to see a couple walking through the door. The woman was in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in an elegant ponytail and wearing a simple but clearly expensive dress. The man beside her was tall, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, dressed in dark jeans and a button-down shirt. They looked around the diner uncertainly until the woman's eyes found Maya's. Even across the room, Maya could see the recognition, followed immediately by tears. The couple approached her table slowly, almost reverently. "Maya?" the woman asked softly. Maya nodded, standing up awkwardly. "You must be—" "I'm Elena Rothschild," the woman said, extending her hand. "And this is my husband, Marcus. We're—" "The parents," Maya finished. "The twins." "Are alive because of you?" Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. Elena reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, scrolling to a video. "Would you like to see them?" Maya's breath caught in her throat. "Yes, please." Elena turned the phone toward Maya, and she found herself looking at two healthy, laughing baby boys sitting in high chairs, covered in what appeared to be mashed sweet potatoes. They were banging spoons on their trays, giggling at each other, their faces bright and animated and so completely alive. "That was taken yesterday," Elena said softly. "They're 7 months old now, completely healthy. Perfect development. No complications from—" She paused, her voice breaking slightly. "From that night." Maya stared at the video, tears streaming down her face. These were the babies she'd last seen unconscious and dying, their tiny faces pale and lifeless. Now they were vibrant, active, normal children. "They're beautiful," Maya whispered. "They're alive," Marcus said simply, "because you chose to save them instead of following rules." The three of them sat down in the booth, Maya on one side, the Rothschilds on the other. For a moment, no one spoke. "We've been looking for you for 6 weeks," Elena said finally. "The hospital wouldn't give us any information. Patient privacy laws, they said. We hired a private investigator. We called in favors. We did everything we could think of to find the woman who saved our children." "Why?" Maya asked. Marcus and Elena exchanged a look. "Because we needed to thank you properly," Marcus said. "Because we needed to make sure you were okay. And because we discovered some things about that night that you need to know." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of things?" Elena leaned forward. "Maya, our children weren't just sick that night. They were poisoned." "Poisoned?" Maya's voice came out as barely a whisper. "The nanny we'd hired," Marcus explained. "Her name wasn't really Sarah Mitchell, it was Sarah Kozlov. She had a criminal record we didn't find because she used false documents. She was working for someone who wanted to hurt us financially." "I don't understand." "We're technology entrepreneurs," Elena said. "We founded a company called Rothschild Technologies 5 years ago. We developed software that several major corporations have been trying to acquire. When we refused to sell, some people got creative in their attempts to pressure us." Maya stared at them. "You're saying someone tried to kill your babies to get your company?" "We're saying someone tried to make us desperate enough to sell everything to pay for medical care for our children," Marcus corrected. "They didn't want to kill the boys. They wanted to create a situation where we'd be financially and emotionally destroyed enough to accept any offer." "But the blood loss was caused by a slow-acting anticoagulant," Elena said. "Sarah had been giving it to them in small doses for a week, just enough to make them slightly lethargic, which we attributed to normal baby development changes. But that night she gave them a larger dose and then disappeared, knowing we'd find them in critical condition." Maya felt sick. That's monstrous." "Yes," Marcus agreed. "And if you hadn't been there, if you hadn't made the choice you made, their plan would have worked. Our children would have died, and we would have been too destroyed to care about business or money or anything else." "The FBI arrested Sarah 3 days ago," Elena added. "She was hiding in Mexico, but they extradited her. She's cooperating with the investigation, giving up the people who hired her." Maya shook her head, trying to process this information. But why are you telling me this? Why does it matter? Because, Marcus said, you didn't just save our children that night. You stopped a conspiracy. You prevented a corporate assassination. You're not just a hero, Maya. You're the reason justice is being served. And, Elena added, you need to know that the hospital knew. Maya's blood ran cold. What? Not about the poisoning specifically, Marcus clarified, but they knew the circumstances were suspicious. They knew the nanny had disappeared. They knew the blood loss was consistent with anticoagulant poisoning. And they knew that in a case like that, immediate transfusion was the only option. They knew you were right to do what you did, Elena said, anger creeping into her voice. They knew you saved our children's lives. And they fired you anyway because they were more concerned about liability than about supporting a nurse who'd acted heroically. Maya stared at them, feeling the world shift around her. They knew. We have documentation, Marcus said. Internal emails, meeting notes. They discussed whether to publicly support your actions and decided against it because of financial exposure concerns. So they let you take the fall, Elena said softly. They let you lose your job and your license and your livelihood to protect themselves legally. Maya put her head in her hands. For 6 weeks, she'd been questioning herself, wondering if she'd been reckless, if she'd been wrong to break protocol. And all along, the hospital had known she was right. Maya, Elena said gently, look at me. Maya raised her head. You did everything right that night. Everything. You saved our children when the system failed them. You acted with courage when others acted with cowardice. You chose life over liability. You are exactly the kind of nurse the world needs more of. But I lost everything, Maya said, tears flowing freely now. Marcus smiled. No, you didn't. You lost a job. But you didn't lose who you are. You didn't lose your integrity. You didn't lose your calling. And you definitely didn't lose our gratitude. Maya, Elena said, we want to offer you something. What? A chance to get back everything you lost and more. Maya looked at them suspiciously. What do you mean? Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her a news article dated that morning. The headline read, Rothschild Technologies acquires St. Mary's Children's Hospital. Maya stared at the screen. You? What? We bought it, Elena said simply. All of it. The building, the equipment, the staff contracts, the policies. Everything. You bought an entire hospital? We bought the hospital that fired our children's hero, Marcus corrected, and we're going to make some changes. Maya's mind was reeling. I don't understand. Why would you... Because, Elena interrupted, we want to make sure that no nurse ever gets punished for saving lives again. We want to create a place where heroes are celebrated, not fired. Where patient care comes before liability concerns. Where doing the right thing is always supported. And, Marcus added, we want to offer you the chance to lead that transformation. Maya stared at them. Lead it how? As Director of Emergency Nursing, Elena said, with full authority to rewrite protocols, train staff, and ensure that St. Mary's becomes the kind of hospital where nurses like you are supported and celebrated. Plus, Marcus added, immediate reinstatement of your license, full back pay for the time you've been unemployed, and forgiveness of all your student loans. Maya felt like she couldn't breathe. This isn't real. This can't be real. It's very real, Elena assured her. We've already terminated Administrator Wells. Patricia has been demoted to staff nurse. Dr. Harrison has been promoted to Chief of Emergency Medicine. And we're waiting for your answer about the director position. Maya looked around the diner, at the chipped tables, the grease-stained walls, the life she'd been forced to build from the ashes of her career. Then she looked at the Rothschilds, at these people who'd moved heaven and earth to find her and thank her and restore what had been taken from her. The babies, she said finally. Would it be possible to see them? Elena smiled, the first genuine smile Maya had seen from her. Maya, we were hoping you'd ask that. They're in the car with their grandmother. We didn't want to overwhelm you, but I'd like to meet them properly, Maya said. The babies I saved. Their names are Daniel and David, Marcus said, And they're going to grow up knowing that a brave nurse named Maya Chen gave them the gift of life. As they stood to go outside, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in 6 weeks. Hope. Not just for her own future, but for what healthcare could be when people chose courage over convenience, compassion over liability. The babies she'd saved had saved her right back. And tomorrow, she'd return to St. Mary's Hospital, not as a fired nurse seeking vindication, but as a leader with the power to ensure that heroism was always rewarded. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, exactly 8 weeks after Maya had been fired. She stood in the main lobby of St. Mary's Children's Hospital, wearing a new navy blue dress that Elena had insisted on buying for her, watching as reporters set up cameras and adjusted microphones. It felt surreal to be back in this building. The same antiseptic smell, the same fluorescent lighting, the same layout, but everything else had changed. Where Administrator Wells' portrait had hung, there was now a mission statement in elegant lettering: patient care above all else. Where corporate policy posters had covered the walls, there were now photos of children, patients who'd been treated at St. Mary's, smiling and healthy. Dr. Harrison approached her, grinning widely. "Ready for this, Director Chen?" Maya still wasn't used to the title. Director of Emergency Nursing at St. Mary's Children's Hospital. It came with a salary that was triple what she'd made as a staff nurse, an office with windows, and the authority to implement the changes she'd always dreamed of making. "I think so," she said, adjusting the small pin on her lapel, a gift from the Rothschilds that displayed the St. Mary's logo with the words "Hero" engraved beneath it. "The nursing staff is excited," Dr. Harrison continued. "Janet's been telling everyone about the new protocols you're implementing. The life over liability guidelines are already being requested by other hospitals." Maya smiled. The life over liability protocols were her first major initiative as director, a comprehensive set of guidelines that empowered nurses to make emergency decisions that prioritized patient welfare over institutional protection. What she'd done for Daniel and David would never again result in termination at St. Mary's. "Maya." Elena Rothschild appeared beside her, carrying 7-month-old Daniel, while Marcus followed with David. The twins were alert and curious, looking around at all the activity with bright, intelligent eyes. Maya's breath caught every time she saw them. These beautiful, healthy babies had been dying in her arms just 2 months ago. "How are you feeling?" Elena asked. "Nervous? Grateful? Ready?" Maya reached out to touch Daniel's tiny hand, and he immediately grasped her finger with surprising strength. "Still can't quite believe this is real." "Believe it," Marcus said firmly. "You've earned this. All of it." The press conference began with Elena and Marcus at the podium, explaining their acquisition of the hospital and their vision for its future. They spoke about patient-centered care, supporting healthcare workers, and creating an environment where doing the right thing was always rewarded. Then Dr. Harrison took the microphone to discuss the new medical protocols and the hospital's commitment to emergency care excellence. He spoke passionately about supporting nurses' clinical judgment and empowering frontline staff to save lives. Finally, it was Maya's turn. She approached the podium carrying Daniel, with David in Elena's arms nearby. The room fell silent, except for the clicking of cameras. 8 weeks ago, I made a decision that cost me my job," Maya began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I chose to give my blood to save 2 dying babies rather than follow hospital protocol. I knew there would be consequences. I was prepared to lose everything. But I couldn't watch 2 children die when I had the power to save them." She looked down at Daniel, who was contentedly playing with the microphone cord. "What I didn't know was that these babies' parents would spend weeks trying to find me. I didn't know they would buy an entire hospital to make sure other nurses never faced the choice I faced. And I didn't know that what I thought was an ending was actually a beginning." Maya lifted her head to address the cameras directly. "Today, I start work as Director of Emergency Nursing at St. Mary's Children's Hospital. But more importantly, today we launch a new era of healthcare. One where saving lives is always the priority, where nurses are empowered to use their judgment, and where doing the right thing is celebrated, not punished." She paused, looking around the room at the faces watching her. Reporters, hospital staff, and fellow nurses who'd come to show support. Daniel and David Rothschild are alive today because I broke the rules, but they shouldn't have to be. No child should have to depend on a healthcare worker risking their career to receive life-saving care. That's why we're implementing new protocols that will ensure the decision I made, choosing life over liability, will never again result in termination. A reporter raised her hand. Ms. Chen, do you have any regrets about your actions that night? Maya looked down at Daniel again, then back at the cameras. My only regret is that it took 8 weeks in a hospital acquisition for the healthcare system to acknowledge that saving lives should always come first. Another reporter spoke up. What's your message to other nurses facing similar situations? Trust your training, trust your judgment, and remember that your oath is to your patients, not to institutional policies. At St. Mary's, we will always support nurses who put patient care first. After the press conference, Maya found herself surrounded by colleagues. Some who'd supported her during the controversy, others who'd been afraid to speak up at the time but were now eager to express their admiration. Janet pulled her aside with tears in her eyes. Maya, honey, I've been a nurse for 32 years, and I've never been prouder of this profession than I am right now. Thank you for standing by me, Maya said, hugging her mentor. Standing by you? Child, you stood up for all of us. You showed the world what nursing really means. As the crowd began to disperse, Maya walked through the hospital corridors that had once felt like a second home, then became a place of humiliation, and were now her domain to transform. She passed the trauma bay where she'd made her fateful decision, the NICU where Daniel and David had recovered, and the staff locker room where she'd packed her belongings in a cardboard box just 8 weeks ago. She ended up in her new office, spacious, with windows overlooking the children's garden, and a desk large enough to spread out the protocols and policies she was already revising. On the wall was a framed photo Elena had given her, Daniel and David in their high chairs, covered in sweet potato and grinning at the camera. Dr. Harrison knocked on her open door. Mind if I come in? Of course. Maya gestured to the chair across from her desk. How does it feel to be chief of emergency medicine? Surreal, but good surreal. He paused. Maya, I have to ask, are you okay with all this? The publicity, the attention, the pressure? Maya considered the question. 8 weeks ago, she'd been pouring coffee at Murphy's Diner, wondering if she'd ever work as a nurse again. Now she was the director of emergency nursing at a major hospital, with the resources and authority to implement changes she'd only dreamed of before. You know what's funny? She said finally. I was so afraid of the attention at first. The news coverage, people recognizing me, having my worst moment broadcast to the world. But now I realize if my story helps even one nurse feel empowered to save a life, if it changes even one hospital policy, if it makes even one administrator think twice before punishing someone for doing the right thing, then it was worth it. Dr. Harrison smiled. The nursing schools are already incorporating your case into their curricula. They're calling it the Maya Chen Protocol, using clinical judgment to override institutional policies when lives are at stake. Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest. Her name would be associated not with the controversy, but with a new approach to nursing that put patients first. Michael, can I ask you something? Anything. That night, when I made the decision to give blood, did you know I was right? Did you know it was the only way to save them? Dr. Harrison was quiet for a moment. Yes, I knew. We all knew. But we were too afraid to say it. And now? Now we work for a hospital that would celebrate your decision, not punish it. Now we work for leaders who understand that sometimes the right thing and the policy thing aren't the same thing. Maya nodded, feeling a deep sense of closure settling over her. She'd lost everything for making a choice she'd make again in a heartbeat. And in losing everything, she'd found something better. A chance to ensure other nurses would never face that same impossible choice. Her computer chimed with an email. The subject line read, "Thank you from Oregon." Maya opened it to find a message from a pediatric nurse in Portland. Ms. Chen, I saw your press conference today. Last week, I was faced with a situation similar to yours. A child needed immediate care that went against hospital protocol. Instead of hesitating, I remembered your story and did what was right for my patient. Because of you, I knew I would be supported. The child is fine, and my hospital administration backed my decision completely. You've changed everything for nurses like us. Thank you. Maya leaned back in her chair and looked out the window at the garden where children played. Children who were alive and healthy because dedicated healthcare workers had put their welfare first. Daniel and David were down there somewhere with their grandmother, breathing and laughing and living because Maya had chosen to break the rules. And now, because of that choice, the rules themselves were changing. 6 months later, Maya stood in the same trauma bay where she'd made the decision that changed everything. But this time, she wasn't alone with an impossible choice. She was surrounded by a team of nurses and residents implementing the new protocols she'd helped develop. Remember, she told the group of nursing students gathered for their rotation, your clinical judgment is your most valuable tool. Trust it, use it, and know that here at St. Mary's, you'll always be supported for putting patient care first. The students, 8 young men and women at the beginning of their nursing careers, hung on her every word. Maya had become something of a legend in nursing schools across the country. Her story was taught as a case study in professional ethics. Her protocols were being adopted by hospitals nationwide. Director Chen, one student raised her hand. What if we're wrong? What if our judgment leads to a bad outcome? Maya smiled. It was a question she got frequently, and an important one. Making the right decision doesn't guarantee the right outcome, she said. Medicine isn't perfect. Sometimes we do everything correctly and still lose a patient. But that doesn't mean we stop trying. It means we learn, we improve, and we keep putting our patients first. Her pager buzzed. Emergency in the NICU. That's all for today, Maya told the students. Remember, trust your training, trust your instincts, and never be afraid to save a life. Maya hurried to the NICU where she found Dr. Harrison working on a premature infant born just that morning at 28 weeks. The baby was struggling with respiratory distress, and the parents, teenagers who looked terrified, were hovering nearby. What's the situation? Maya asked. Baby girl Martinez, born at 2.3 pounds, needs immediate intubation, but the parents are refusing consent, Dr. Harrison explained quietly. They're scared of the risks, but without it. Maya looked at the baby's monitors. Oxygen saturation was dropping, heart rate was climbing. They had maybe minutes to act. She approached the young parents, Maria, who couldn't have been older than 17, and Carlos, who looked even younger. I'm Maya Chen, the director of nursing, she said gently. I know this is scary. Can you tell me what you're worried about? They want to put a tube down her throat, Maria sobbed. What if it hurts her? What if something goes wrong? Maya knelt beside Maria's wheelchair. I understand your fear, but your daughter can't breathe on her own right now. Without help, she's going to get sicker. The intubation will help her breathe while her lungs develop. But the risks, Carlos started, are much smaller than the risk of doing nothing, Maya said firmly but kindly. I've been a nurse for 6 years, and I've seen hundreds of premature babies. With proper respiratory support, babies born at 28 weeks have excellent survival rates and normal development. She took Maria's hand. I know it's scary to make decisions for someone so small and helpless, but right now, your daughter needs you to be brave for her. Maria looked at her baby, so tiny and fragile in the incubator, and nodded through her tears. Okay, help her. 20 minutes later, baby Martinez was stable and breathing comfortably with the ventilator's assistance. Her parents sat beside her incubator, holding her tiny fingers through the porthole openings. Will she be okay? Maria asked. She's a fighter, Maya said, watching the baby's strong heartbeat on the monitor. Just like her parents. As Maya walked back to her office, she reflected on how much had changed in the past 6 months. The Maya Chen protocols had been implemented in over 200 hospitals. She'd received speaking invitations from nursing conferences around the world. 3 different universities had offered her teaching positions. But the biggest change was personal. She was engaged to Dr. Harrison, who'd stood by her through everything. They were planning a small wedding in the hospital chapel, with Daniel and David Rothschild as ring bearers, a detail that made Maya smile every time she thought about it. Her mother's medical bills were fully paid, and she'd been able to move to a beautiful apartment near the hospital. The student loans that had hung over her for years were gone. For the first time in her adult life, Maya had financial security. More importantly, she had purpose. Every policy she wrote, every protocol she implemented, every nurse she mentored was part of building a healthcare system that valued compassion over liability, courage over caution. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Family dinner Sunday? The boys have been asking for their favorite nurse." Maya smiled and typed back, "Wouldn't miss it. How are they doing?" "Walking everywhere and getting into everything. Perfect, healthy, normal toddlers, thanks to you." Maya arrived at her office to find a package waiting on her desk. Inside was a children's book titled The Brave Nurse with a note from the author. "Inspired by your story. For every child who needs to know that heroes come in scrubs." She flipped through the beautifully illustrated pages, which told the story of a nurse who saved 2 babies by giving her own blood, lost her job for breaking the rules, but ultimately changed the way hospitals worked. The final page showed the nurse in her new office, surrounded by other nurses learning to be brave. Maya's computer chimed with an email marked urgent from the hospital board. Her heart skipped, old habits from her days of living in fear of administrative displeasure. But this email was different. "Maya, the board has voted unanimously to name the new Children's Emergency Wing the Maya Chen Center for Pediatric Emergency Care. Construction begins next month. Thank you for everything you've brought to our hospital. Board of Directors, St. Mary's Children's Hospital." Maya sat back in her chair, overwhelmed. 8 months ago, she'd been a struggling nurse living paycheck to paycheck, doing her best to save lives while following rules that didn't always make sense. She'd made one decision, one moment of choosing courage over caution, and it had changed everything. Not just for her, but for Daniel and David. For other nurses facing impossible choices. For hospitals reconsidering their priorities. For the entire profession of nursing. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Janet appeared with a cup of coffee and a knowing smile. "How are you doing, Director?" Janet asked, settling into the chair across from Maya's desk. "Still processing it all," Maya admitted. "Sometimes I can't believe this is real." "Honey, you earned every bit of this. You showed the world what nursing really means. You proved that sometimes breaking the rules is the most ethical thing you can do." Maya nodded, thinking about the nursing students she'd spoken to that morning, the protocols she was developing, the wing that would bear.